You're listening to the Sisters-in-Laws podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women who replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women, according to the NIH and CDC. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee, and you will hear me interview sisters-in-laws who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Now let's get started. Welcome, Kimi, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, currently professionally, I work for a major company and I run business operations. I've been with the company for about 2 years, and before that I was in the government sector, so I really enjoy the work that I do. I'm super, I guess I would say, ecstatic to have a job that has supported me on my journey. And when I'm not doing that, for my personal time, I like speaking and connecting with other mothers who have experienced loss, which led me to find this organization called Time, taking interest in our mental health and emotional health. As a Black woman, I just noticed like our mental health is outright neglected and our emotional health is discarded. And I said, no, I don't want that. After my experiencing, seeing the support or the lack of support that I received from my community, being family, friends, I said, no, I can't be the only one that is enduring this, right? And that's what kind of led me to start that group. I think I needed it, and I knew some other people, both in my state and abroad, that really needed these services. So I appreciate it was weekly, and then with COVID-19, the demand and working and everyone's schedule being kind of scattered, we moved it to monthly.
Awesome. So take us back on your journey to motherhood and share with us your lost story.
Wow. So that has to take me back to Chicago when I was living there. I was with the love of my life. Oh my gosh. I mean, I would do any and everything. I mean, just to feel, that level of happiness that I felt during that time when I was with my partner. I was working a really good job, no complaints. I wouldn't say I was necessarily trying to conceive, but I wasn't going to be upset if it happened. And it happened. I mean, I was like on birth control, like on and off. Just being young, I was traveling the world, just, being a mover and a shaker, right? And I found I was pregnant, and this was around like April, May of 2019. And I was so excited, and I was like, you know what, I'm kind of nervous, so I'm not going to really tell anybody. Maybe I'll tell my family, maybe, I'll tell his family, and then then I'll tell work, or, I'll figure that out. And, that I would say that's life got real for me. So I went to a doctor, and I took like a couple, it was a friend that told me, like, I think you might be a little pregnant or something. You're looking a little different, looking a little round, I love our culture. We're just we're very creative in terms of like description. So I was looking a little round and took some tests, went to Walmart, grabbed a few tests, and they were all positive. And I took them like right before I was getting up at work. So it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I found I was pregnant 5 o'clock in the morning, and like everybody's asleep. So I had no one to really talk to or share the news. And I'm like, so I was holding this secret in until, everybody would wake up and, get ready for work, and I'll be able to send out my text message with the, gotta love technology. I remember making my appointment, and I made an appointment to a doctor that was like in a suburb. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. This is a woman of color, not a Black woman, but a woman of color. Probably a little, newer to the medical field, but she wasn't a newbie. It wasn't her first year practicing. And I went in and they were asking all this information. And she's like, all right, we're going to do your ultrasound. And I was like, okay. It was just like, okay, so you're, this young Black woman, you're having a baby. Like, where's your partner? Where I'm like, at work. Like, where, like not thinking, right? Just being culturally oblivious because I'm in this corporate world. I have all these resources, educated. So I was so naive to like the level of racism and the microaggressions that I had experienced at that time. I didn't know. It wasn't until I looked back at the experience. And I remember her doing the ultrasound. At this point, it was a transvaginal ultrasound. She was like, I don't see a baby. Come back in 2 weeks, but right now I'm going to take some of your blood. And I'm like, so does this mean I'm miscarrying? What does this mean, right? So I went back, and in the 2 weeks, I had my tests, my levels, my HCG, all of that, and I'm young, so I'm telling my partner, like, something's wrong. He's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't really know. So I was calling my mom, I was calling my grandmother, the older, the elders of the community who you want to get some enlightenment from, and they were kind of like, this doesn't really sound right, but if the pregnancy is not viable and she let you go home, that's not a good practice. So I went back 2 weeks. I got my results from my labs. I was very much pregnant. The baby was very much growing. She was like, okay, yeah, you're actually pregnant. I see the baby. I see the fetal pole. I mean, all of this terminology that I just was not used to because I'm thinking, so naive, you get pregnant, you have a baby. Not knowing what actually goes into it. It was after that experience, I think I was in a therapy session. I was speaking to someone, and I said, I don't think, things, something's not right about like my treatment. She didn't give me any information. She said, oh yeah, you're pregnant. But 2 weeks ago, she was telling me that there was no pregnancy. So what exactly is going on? I went back a third time. At this point, my therapist was like, hey, I'm gonna go with you. Like, you're in this state. Like, I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna go. I just want to see what she's gonna say, right? Like, I want to come with you from a mental health perspective to see what's going on. And I was telling her like, hey, what exactly does this mean for the future of my pregnancy? Do I continue this pregnancy? Do I not? What is actually going on? And she's just like, it's your choice. I said, okay, what is the medical, procedures, or what am I supposed to do? If what would you recommend to someone to do? And I could not get any information. My therapist is like, I think it's time to go see someone else. I said, you know what? I'm going to look for me a Black provider. And I found a provider that came highly recommended, wasn't too far from the house. I was like, this is great. I thought it was just going to be one of those blissful pregnancies where I have a Black doctor, Black pediatrician, just Black everything, Black nurses. Like, that's how I wanted my experience to be. So I went to this doctor. I got my ultrasounds. At this point, my pregnancy is progressing. Like, I'm just getting big. And she said, everything's fine. Your heart rate. I mean, all my exams were fine. I had all the, fetal anomaly tests. I had it all. Everything was fine. All of my tests came back normal. I was getting my exams, my pelvic exams, just to, check on my cervix. All of that. I was getting ultrasounds. And everything was fine. My doctor even approved of me to go on a trip. And I beat myself up for this. I went on a trip. I went overseas. And, everything was fine. So I came back home after that trip. And I was in the process, too, because I said, hey, I'm actually in Chicago. I want to move to Miami. I want to be close to family. So I was trying to get in some type of position where my job would, bounce me back and forth. And I was able to, right? It worked out for me. So I'm in the process of facilitating my move. And it was probably 2 days after, it was 2 days after I returned home, my water broke. That was 2 weeks after my last doctor's visit, and I arrived to a hospital. Let me take you a few steps back. So in the process of me knowing I was going to be between two places, I found a doctor here, and I was looking, and I wanted a Black doctor. That's why there's a little saying right now on Facebook. It's like Black OBGYNs, like, we need you. Like, I don't want to die in childbirth. Like, there's literally it's viral at this point. And I'm just like, okay, we're obviously, as a people, we're missing the point. I didn't get to go to this doctor because my appointment was like later that week, right before I went into labor, before I called in and went to the hospital. So I woke up, there was like a pop. I also wasn't sure and I didn't understand about the different water breaking. Like, it's not a splash of water all the time. So I had a pop, right? That was my sensation. And my mom was like, something's not right. I was in a hotel because I was here on business. So I had to leave the hotel in the middle of work. And that's when just my life changed forever. It's so real because it's literally like a year ago now. And I went to the hospital and nobody communicated with me. So I do have you wouldn't probably know my age. So you would just probably, if my hair is not done, I don't have on makeup, you would probably think I'm a little girl. And I remember going to the hospital and I'm like, hey, I'm 19 weeks. Something's wrong. I might be spotting a little bit, but I did feel like a pop. So I think something went wrong. Maybe you guys can like stitch me up, do some plumbing, just make sure everything's okay. So he's like, hey, it was a physician assistant. He's like, it's normal. You bleed a little bit. Everything's going to be fine. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go home. We're good. I'm on this journey. Like, at this time, I'm not even communicating with my partner. He doesn't know. He just knows like I'm working. He doesn't know anything wrong. Doesn't know I'm at the hospital. And I'll never forget. So he's like, well, we're going to take you back. But before you go back, we're going to, do a ultrasound. And he's like, one more thing too, you'll be good because we don't send you upstairs to labor and delivery to be cared for. You have to be past 20 weeks. I was like, okay, that's fine. It shouldn't be necessary. So I got the ultrasound. And I remember the ultrasound tech just not telling me anything. She just looked, something went wrong. She called another person to come in and take a second look. The first indicator that something was wrong. And she was just like, hey, just drink water. And I'm like, what's going on? And she didn't answer. And I knew, like, they probably can't answer for rules or whatever. And she just had this strange look in her face. And she's like, just drink a lot of water. And I was like, what is my baby, doing? At this time, I opted to not know the sex until delivery. And she asked me, she was like, do you want to go to sex or whatever? And I was like, no, I'm just going to wait. And she was, making sure she was careful with what she said. But I knew something was really wrong. I just didn't know what, right? I saw the ultrasound. My baby was kicking, moving around, floating, swimming, doing all of that stuff that they do. And I just thought nothing was wrong. And I'm like, how naive. And this is where the story just takes a turn. So they put me in an emergency room, like in a little room, and then they moved me to labor and delivery triage. And I'm like, where are you all taking me? And I overheard some nurses talking, like a younger Black nurse was talking to an older white one. And she was just like, well, why didn't they just give her a cerclage? And I remember her like an emergency clause. Why didn't they give her an emergency clause? And the other nurse, like whatever her response was, I couldn't hear. And I knew at this point, I said, something's wrong. I'm in here by myself. So I called literally every single like female family member that I had experience in the medical field or had children. And I'm like, somebody needs to come up here. My mom was like an hour away at work. I said, I just need somebody. Like, at this point, I'm panicking. And they put me in triage, they changed my clothing, and they put everything in a bag. And I'm like, this is weird for a first-time mother. I didn't know what to expect. I was out of it. And they were giving me like little Tylenols and stuff to say, hey, this will help you, from your cramping or the uncomfortableness that you may be experiencing. And nobody communicated to me. Like, I didn't know what was going on. And then I was pushed to a room. And that's where I definitely was, out of it. I was very upset. And I said, why are you all putting me in a room with an incubator, a baby bed? Like, why? It's too early for me to have a baby. It's no delivery going to be happening today. And by this time, so hours had passed because I went in the morning because I was waking up for work. Now we're early afternoon. So I'm in there for hours, not knowing anything. I wish I would have known something because like I would have been Googling, right? Different things. But I took the word of the physician assistant that I was going to be okay. So I just said, you know what, everything's going to work its way. It's going to work out. So I didn't worry about it. And that's when the doctor, a Black doctor, I'm emphasizing it because I want people to understand that it's not a race thing. It is the racist ideologies that are being taught in these Western institutions to cause people to have that implicit bias when they're working with different populations. I remember she came in and it was a nurse, it was another nurse, and she was just like, there's no chance of viability. And I was like, what? Like, no, like, get out of here. This is my first time meeting you. You should introduce yourself. You should explain to me what's going on. But no, you just tell me that my baby's not making it. I said, well, why? Oh, the membranes are protruding. What does that mean? Oh, it just your water broke. There's no more layers protecting your baby from the barrier, so you can give birth at any given moment. And I was like, this is some BS, honestly and truly. Like, what's going on? So my mom was like fussed in the room, and she's like, what's going on? So I guess the doctor, they shared some words. My mom just starts crying, and I'm like, okay, there goes my support. So what am I going to do? So I started crying too because I was just that overwhelmed. And she gave me, instead of allowing me to naturally labor and allow my daughter to come, because they don't know if you start, laboring, it could be a day or two, it could be a week. They don't know, right? Based on my early gestation, we're actually late in terms of a loss. But I just remember like not being like prepped and or knowing what to do. I remember calling my father and my stepmother, and I was like, hey, I was like, can you guys like talk to the doctor? I know they, had their share of things when it came to fertility and things. So I was like, you need to talk to my doctor. They're telling me there's no chance of viability. Like, I don't believe that. My daughter her heart's beating. She's moving. Everything's good. I don't feel sick. I had a little spotting. So they argued with that doctor for 2 hours. I am not sure what was said or how it was said, but I just know I became numb. And the doctor came back and said, hey, I'm going to induce you because we just don't know what's going on. Now that I know what I know, I wouldn't have accepted to be induced, right? But she had told my family that I was going to die if I didn't hurry up and deliver. So they were panicking, thinking they were about to lose me. I decided to take the Pitocin, and they also don't tell you that Pitocin is very painful, right? So you're getting induced, and your pain is just going to be times 10 with the contractions and all. So, I mean, I experienced all of that excruciating, like, pain, and the pain of knowing that my daughter was too young to come home. I remember delivering her, and they came in. So, like, everybody came up. They suited up, they scrubbed up, and they were there. And I'm just like, what, why do we have all these? And I was, it was rough. It was extremely tough for me to just go through that. And the doctors and the nurses were like, oh yeah, she's so tiny, name her. And they put her on clothes and they handed her to me. And I was just in shock, right? Like I can't even tell you what was going through my mind at that moment. It wasn't great things. And, it happened so fast, and it was just like the absolute worst. No one explained anything to me. I just didn't know. I didn't know if something was wrong. Just like, well, yeah, we're gonna do some tests. And I was like, okay, we can, let's run some tests. And what happened, I said, yeah, test the placenta, test the baby. I hadn't realized my placenta was not out. So it was hours later. So my baby's already to the side, just sitting there with me. And I think it was, I said, I don't feel good. I was like, I'm just feeling weak or something. I just didn't feel like myself. I realized that I was hemorrhaging. It was a relative that came in to just check on me. And I said, hey, can you look? I think something's not right. And she was just like, there's a hemorrhage going on. And she came and went to one of the nurses, and they like rushed me into surgery. And that was like the last time that day that I would see my relatives. And I still had no idea what was going on. There was a person who knew me personally from like the outside of the community. Actually, not me, but was a friend of a relative. Escorted me to like my new room, and was explaining like, hey, like I was just in this situation with my daughter, and it was just, it was tough. She was like, I was there, so she was there, and I said, who knows? Maybe she's my guardian angel. If she wasn't there, what would have happened? If watching those doctors, watching those nurses, I had already experienced the worst, and then at this point they took my baby away, so I didn't know like I wouldn't see her again. I didn't sign any paperwork. Fast forward, I realized that her remains were discarded. So I wasn't able to have a proper burial. I wasn't able to receive ashes. So that was a certain level of grief in itself. And I was asking for documentation. I'm like, hey, show me something where, I said that you all could do this. And they just weren't able to. And, that was just that whole experience. They gave me those generic answers like, what is it, PPROM, ruptured membrane, ruptured placenta. Like they just did not know. I was stuck with all these things, thinking something's wrong with me, and we don't know. And that is what like led me on this journey to really find out about like Black women, our lives, because obviously mine didn't matter, and I witnessed that firsthand. My babies did not matter. Was everything done appropriately? Of course not. Do I think more things could have been done? Yes. Like, when something happens, it happens. And it's how you live and how you live afterward.
Wow, thank you so much. I would love for you to take us on what did that next week look like? What did that next month look like? And then now it's been a year. How has this year been for you on your healing?
Wow. So we lose relatives, we lose grandparents, cousins, uncles. Death is something that we know happens. And I just did not know what happens to you as a person when you lose a child. I would say for 6 months, I just didn't talk. I know I didn't eat for 3 weeks. Like, I lost so much weight. I mean, it was just, I was on iron medication from like the blood loss. And iron medication hurts you, right? And I just remember just being so sick, and I just didn't get out of bed. I just didn't talk to anybody. I cried, and that was, the symptoms of like the first couple of weeks. But for 6 months, like I did not go out. I would not grocery shop. I would not talk to people. I was kind of stuck. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with work? And one thing I realized with the community, people will see you and they'll say like, oh, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Not understanding and realizing that that is a trigger, right? Because I'm here for my daughter who I don't have. It was hard. I mean, I'm thankful for like the support of, my partner's family. His dad was just always checking on me and was just like, completely heartbroken. But, the other side of loss, like my partner did not take it well. That caused a strain. That just, that caused a lot of blame. That just, it caused unnecessary tension. And it was horrible. And I just felt so alone. My family didn't get it. Everybody just tells you like, get on over it. You can have another baby, have a lot, have more. You're gonna forget about Kennedy. And I'm like, no, it does not work like this. It does not. And I had to spend a lot of time educating other people. And I'm an old soul, so I was raised by my grandmother, and she had never experienced loss, or she knew people, but it wasn't ever in a close enough way for her to have them in her household, or for them to be so close that she would talk to them every day. So seeing me kind of revert to like a hermit crab and just avoid everybody, it did something to her. And I just explained to her, I'm like, we all grieve differently. I was just a very standoff griever. I wanted to be to myself. I didn't want any human interaction. I deactivated social media. I wanted to be alone. I didn't want to hear anything about anybody having a child. Didn't want to hear anything about a baby shower. I didn't want to see children. I didn't want to see pregnant people. I just really, just needed to be alone. I just needed to take time to reflect and to process what happened to me. And it was weird. I buried my uncle on yesterday, which was my grandmother's brother. And I found that our ways of grieving are very similar. And I had to point it out to her. I said, you're extremely standoffish. You don't want to get out of bed. You lost your best friend. You lost your family, your last living, relative from your parents. I get it, right? I said, but I'm here to support you. You did not, know how to be there for me or what to do or how to do it. But I'm here to show you that it's okay for you to grieve how you need to grieve. And that's a year later. But I mean, that first year was just trash. I couldn't focus at work. I was eating. I was just all over the place. I was just like, where do I live? What do I do? What do I tell my job? And I was able to get some leave, when my job actually planted a tree in the memory of my daughter. And I really appreciated that. They didn't force me to come to work immediately. Well, actually, I mean, they were tracking my pregnancy, so they knew that I had made it around the 5-month mark. So, you get all these things and they, start tracking hey, how do you plan on leaving? How are you splitting up your time? What are you doing? All of those constant reminders. And I had to be there. And the good thing I would say is because I was transitioning to another team, no one had saw me prior to me returning to work after losing my daughter, so they didn't know about the pregnancy. But everybody that I was working with at my old location watched me grow, watched me waddle around. So I would say that's probably one of the easier parts of it, not having to explain to teammates at work. But it was hard.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and your light. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com. To stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter, please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.